President Mnangagwa, welcome to the program, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you.
So here you are in the United States at the UN General Assembly. It's your maiden speech, and it's not a secret that the world had a very, very negative impression of Zimbabwe for many, many years.
Yes.
President Mugabe seemed to stay in power forever, and then here you are. What is it that you want to tell the world from the pulpit of the UN?
Well, the first point is that there is a new administration of the Second Republic of Zimbabwe, which I lead. And this is the only time in our history after independence in 1980 that we had more, we usually had 5 political parties contesting in elections. But this time around, because of the democratic political space which we created, we had 133 political parties. And of those 133 political parties, 56 contested the elections.
Okay, so you're talking about a much more pluralistic Zimbabwe. You say that it's a new day, a new team, and a new democracy. What do you say to the people of Zimbabwe and the people who are observing around the world about whether you can be a unifier? Obviously, your election victory was very, very narrow. It was less than 1%. And people have complained about it, and people have said that, you know, they hope that you won't be divisive and be just for the ZANU-PF voters. Let me tell you what the United States has said about the post-election situation. The State Department in August said, the United States government is gravely concerned by credible reports of numerous detentions, beatings, and other abuses of Zimbabweans over the past week, particularly targeting opposition activists. That isn't new Zimbabwe.
I can assure you that this time around, we had a very peaceful, free, fair campaign period, which we have never experienced before. I'm happy that that culture is taking root. I would believe that we should do everything possible under my administration to make sure our people develop a culture of accepting opposing views within the community. And I'm happy that during the entire process of the electoral process, we didn't have any disturbances. All the political parties accessed voters whom they thought would support them. The only event which is regrettable is the one which happened 2 days after the elections. That is what has happened. We are so, we regret about that event, and we are doing everything possible. We had to, just before I came here, a day before I came here, I appointed a commission of inquiry to deal with that, because I felt that it would not be proper for ourselves to investigate ourselves. I felt it was necessary to have an outside inquiry. But besides, my message from the day I took over on the 24th of November last year is peace, peace, unity, unity and love among our people. Yes, indeed, in terms of our constitution and in terms of Commonwealth parliamentary democracy, it's first past the post. And I had 50.6%. My nearest contender had 44, I think, percent. And in terms of our constitution, I won the elections. Although the victory is very narrow, as you say, I agree. I hope that as we go forward, and as we open up Zimbabwe, both economically and politically, I think with the policies we are putting forward, people will understand that we are doing better. But if the opposition are going to have a better message than us, at the next election, the people will support them.
You say all these things, and you also were part of the old regime, right? The Mugabe regime for all those years, from the liberation struggle till you weren't, until you took over. And many people are asking, I think legitimately, is this really a new government? Is it really a new dawn? Or is it a lot of the old guard now taking on a new role? Some people describe it as old wine in new bottles.
If you look at me, then you would say I belong to the old guard, and that is a fact. But look at my cabinet.
And the foreign minister and others.
Look at the new cabinet which I have. How many people are new in that cabinet? you can see the direction in which we are going. And I said this even before the conclusion of the elections, that I'm going to bring in people with the expertise in various areas, the women and the youth, and I've done so. So I believe that people should examine what I am doing and not live on perception. I believe that the past should be left behind and do our best for the future and work for the betterment of our people. And to do so, in my view, I need the best brains the country can produce across the board.
President Mugabe was accused of many violations of human rights, of economic process, of corruption, of all sorts of violations and abuses. Would a Mnangagwa administration hold the former president accountable in any kind of way, in a court, in a truth and reconciliation way? Is that on the agenda?
We cannot put an agenda on a person. We put an agenda to make sure all those involved in corruption have to account for the corruption they committed. We have Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission. I have strengthened that one, which is indicative of my desire to deal with corruption. And so many cases are coming up, if you are following events in Zimbabwe, of prominent persons who have been affected by the drive we're having now against corruption. But indeed, we are not going to, as the new administration, we will not focus on the past. We need to focus, because we are going to live for the future and never go back and live in the past again. We are determined to move away and be again a member of the international community, embraced by all societies in the international family.
So President Mugabe ended up being one of the longest serving presidents in the whole African continent. He just wouldn't leave. Elections or no elections, he just wouldn't go. And I asked him in my interview with him at the UNGA, actually several years ago now, which was about 9 years ago, and he said, I will never leave at the hand of imperialists, and he was furious at the idea of leaving, and he considered any election or any process to be illegitimate. And I'm going to play you a little bit of that.
There is regime change. Haven't you heard of a regime change program by Britain and the United States, which is aimed at getting not just Robert Mugabe out of power, but Robert Mugabe and his party out of power? And that naturally means we dig in, remain in our trenches.
Are you going to stand for election again?
That will depend on what I decide to do in the future.
Can you tell us?
No, not now.
So in retrospect, Mr. President, now that you are the president, was it regrettable that President Mugabe didn't leave legitimately and under elections a long, long time ago?
Now, with the new constitution, which came into office, into effect on the 22nd of May 2013, we have now limited the terms of presidency, just 2 terms, 5 years. If you are able to have 2 terms, then you can, the maximum a person can remain in office are 2 terms. But beyond that, you know, the constitution forbids.
Do you give a pledge that you will abide by that?
Would like to entrench constitutionalism in Zimbabwe.
But will you abide by the 2 terms that you have introduced?
I will abide by that without any iota of resistance at all. Even if the people would love me to the hill, I will still go away, because I believe constitutionalism is important. And in fact, you must give your people a chance to have other people come. 10 years is not a short period, in my view.
You are part of the old regime. You were President Mugabe's intelligence chief. You did take part in the suppression of the tainted elections in 2008, when Morgan Tsvangirai and his movement actually won the parliamentary vote, and actually, they believed, won the first round of the presidential elections. Again, do you regret that? And I will ask you this because upon Morgan Tsvangirai's death not so long ago, you said something very important about it. You said, Both in and after the government of national unity, he remained a national figure who obdurately insisted on free, fair, credible and non-violent elections as a way of strengthening our democracy and our overall re-engagement with the rest of the world.
That is true. You quoted me correctly. But the point is, during that election, former Prime Minister Morgan Tsvangirai had 47% of the vote. My predecessor had 43, I think, percent of the vote, which meant that former Prime Minister Tsvangirai had a better vote than my predecessor.
But it was considered a bit of a stitch-up. Do you regret it?
I regret that my predecessor at the time did not succeed to achieve 50.1% at that election. But again, I don't think it is necessary anymore to deal and dwell in the past. Let us look into the future. Let us, all of us, collectively as a people, under one flag, under one national anthem, and by the guidance of our new constitution, move forward and do improve the economic environment so that we attract global capital coming into our country. For 2 decades, we have been an isolated island country. I don't think it is necessary. Why do we punish our people? Let us have this change. That is my vision.
You've constantly said, my predecessor, my predecessor. You never mention his name.
You have mentioned his
Mugabe.
name. Yes.
I read that you've tried to restrain some of his excesses and some of his impulses.
You are indeed correct that initially he had wanted the same level as before. Then I informed him that this is not correct anymore. My predecessor is a lawyer like myself, so I said, you know, if you read the statutory instrument, you are now entitled to the following. This is what I'm going to do. We must be constitutional. And he accepted, and I'm happy he accepted.
His wife, Grace, is not... What did you say?
Something else.
She's something else. I mean, she wanted to be the leader. She didn't want you to be the leader. There are suspicions that she and her gang even tried to poison you with a poison ice cream cone.
Well, I was poisoned. And up to today, I don't know what I was for 2 days when I was in South Africa after that poisoning. But my one of my current vice presidents was quick enough to fly me to South Africa, where I was saved.
So I want to ask you, because you mentioned the liberation struggle, in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, obviously there was a massacre in Matabeland during the 1980s. And, you know, there are descriptions of what was then described as North Korean trained Zimbabwean forces killing some 20,000 people. Again, is that something that you would consider a formal national apology for?
At the time that happened, my predecessor said it was a moment of madness. That's what he said, which was a result of what was happening internally. But when I took over, I felt that we need to have a finality to this issue. So I appointed Peace and National Reconciliation Commission, which is now almost 8 months into investigations and gathering evidence. And whatever report they are going to make, I've promised the nation that I will make it public for everybody, and they will see it from therefrom.
And if it's the worst of the worst, would you apologize?
Exactly. It will be on the basis of that report and the recommendations of that report. We should be man enough as a government to accept whatever recommendations are made and see how we can, as a government, comply with the recommendations of the report. But I would not want to, in advance, say, I'll do this, I'll do that. I'm waiting to hear from that. But this is the only time in our history that we are saying, let us have things in the open and transparent.
On that note, President Emmerson Mnangagwa, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much.